Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who joins us from around the world. We're so glad you're here. This is Andrew and Renee. Welcome to Stack Series.
It is wonderful to be here. And I have to say, looking at the sheer volume of research we have on the table today, we have our work cut out for us. This is a massive stack.
We really, really do. Today we are exploring a collision. And I don't use that word lightly. We are looking at the collision between ancient medical traditions, specifically traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM, and Ayurveda, and the rigorous, often skeptical lens of modern scientific validation.
A collision is the right word for it. For centuries, they've been on completely different tracks.
Exactly. And I'll be honest with you, when I first saw the topic ancient medicine on our schedule, my brain, it immediately went to a very specific place.
Let me guess. Herbal tea.
Herbal tea, maybe a spa soundtrack, the smell of eucalyptus, relaxation. Not hard science.
That's the default setting for most of us in the West, isn't it? We compartmentalize it. There's real medicine, which is hospitals, white coats, pharmaceuticals, surgery, and then there's wellness, which is sort of everything else.
It feels like two totally different worlds, but as we started digging into this stack, and we're talking systemic reviews, Nobel Prize research, FDA warnings, that distinction, for me, it just started to crumble.
It's a very blurry line.
It is. We aren't just talking about wellness or feeling zen. We are talking about what the researchers in these papers call an ontological divergence. And I stumbled over that phrase for a while.
It's a mouthful.
It sounds like something from a philosophy lecture, not a medical journal.
It does, but it's absolutely crucial to understanding everything else we're going to discuss. Ontology is the study of being, of what actually exists.
Okay.
So when researchers talk about an ontological divergence, they're saying that Western science and ancient Eastern traditions aren't just looking at the same body in different ways. They're fundamentally disagreeing on what the body is.
Whoa. So it's not just a translation error. It's like they're operating in two different universes.
Precisely. For the last few hundred years, the Western narrative has been, very linear. We tell ourselves this story of progress.
Right.
We move from superstition to folklore to alchemy, and finally, we graduated to science. We just assumed the old stuff was guesswork people throwing herbs at a wall to see what stuck.
And now we have the MRI and the electron microscope, so we have the real answers. We leveled up in the video game and never looked back.
That's the story we tell ourselves. But here's the twist that just hooked me immediately. Those modern tools, we're talking systems, biology, omics, neuroimaging, the really high-tech stuff, they aren't debunking these ancient practices.
No, it's the opposite.
It's the opposite. In a weird irony, the most advanced technology we have is finally sophisticated enough to prove that the superstition was actually onto something all along.
Practices that are 3,000 years old are holding up under the microscope.
They're finding the mechanisms behind the metaphors. And that brings us to a really helpful analogy that came up in the source material to explain the difference between these two mindsets. It's the difference between reductionism and holism.
I love this analogy. It's the clock versus the room.
Right. So reductionism, which is the bedrock of modern Western medicine, it's like taking a clock apart to see how the gears work.
Right. You isolate the variables.
You isolate everything. You want to know exactly what this one gear does. You want to know what this one protein does or this one gene.
Which makes sense. I mean, if you want to fix something, you usually take it apart.
It makes perfect sense for a machine. But holism, which is the heart of TCM and Ayurveda, is like looking at how that clock tells time within the context of the whole room.
Okay.
Is the room hot? Is it humid? Is someone looking at the clock? Is the clock even in the right time zone? It's all about the context and the relationships.
And we are going to see that dynamic play out over and over and over again today. We aren't just talking about vague concepts. We're covering Nobel Prizes. We're going to talk about how your gut bacteria are actually acting as chemical factories to make these herbs work.
A critical piece of the puzzle.
We're going to look at the opioid crisis and how acupuncture is being used in the Veterans Health Administration, which is huge.
And we also have to look at the other side of the coin. That rigorous lens of science, it also reveals the dangers.
A very dark side.
We have to talk about heavy metal poisoning, arsenic, mercury, and the regulatory gaps that can make supplements really, really dangerous.
It's a bit of a roller coaster. We've got miracle cures and toxicity warnings all in one discussion. Our mission today is to see if we can achieve what the researchers call a unified biopsychosocial medicine.
A unified model.
Can we bridge that gap between the ancient texts and the laboratory bench?
It is the ultimate question of integrative health.
Yeah.
So where should we start this exploration?
Let's start right there. with that clash of paradigms. We mentioned the clock, but there was another analogy in the reading that I thought was even better. It involved a cat,
Ah, yes. The non-working cat.
non-working cat. And this brings us to a quote from Douglas Adams that popped up in the research. It's funny, but it's also kind of tragic. If you try and take a cat apart to see how it works, the first thing you have on your hands is a non-working cat.
It's a bit gruesome, but it perfectly illustrates the flaw in reductionism.
And just to remind everyone, reductionism is the take the clock apart method.
Right. In the 20th century, biology became obsessed with the molecular level. We thought if we could just isolate the DNA, or the specific protein, or the single receptor, we'd solve the puzzle.
Strip away the noise to find the signal.
We wanted to strip away the noise, but in a living organism, the noise is the signal.
The noise is the cat being alive.
Exactly. You can map every single atom in a cat, but if you don't understand how the circulatory system interacts with the nervous system, which then interacts with the digestive system, all in real time, you don't understand the cat, you just have a list of parts.
And that's where TCM and Ayurveda have always come from. They're systems-based.
Yes, they don't care about the single molecule. They care about the flow, the balance, the pattern. And for a long time, Western science simply didn't have the math or the computing power to model that kind of complexity. We could only study the parts.
So we were stuck with a pile of cat parts and no idea how to make it purr.
Essentially, yes. But that's what's changing so dramatically now. And that's where this systems biology concept comes in. Think of it as the bridge between the ancient scroll and the supercomputer.
Okay, let's unpack this, because systems biology sounds like jargon. How does this actually work in practice?
So systems biology allows us to look at entire networks rather than just single molecules. This is where we get the omics revolution.
Ah, yes. Genomics, proteomics, metabolomics. I always get these mixed up.
It's easy to do. Think of them as layers of a map. Genomics is the map of all the roads in a city, your DNA, the static blueprint.
Okay, the roads. Got it.
Proteomics is the map of all the traffic on those roads, the proteins doing the work, the cars, the trucks, the buses.
The actual activity.
Right. And then metabolomics is what the traffic is carrying, the fuel, the waste, the signals, the cargo. So instead of looking for one active ingredient in a cup of herbal tea.
Hunting for one specific car.
Exactly. Instead of that, omics allows us to see how 500 different compounds in that tea interact with 20,000 genes in your body, and how that changes all the proteins and all the metabolites all at the same time.
So instead of hunting for a needle in a haystack, we have a magnet that can map the entire haystack at once.
That is a great way to put it. And when you apply that lens, that systems lens, to something like Ayurveda, things that sounded mystical start to look physiological.
You mean concepts like Prakriti?
Exactly.
Oh,
Prakriti, that's the individual constitution, right? Your unique body type. In Ayurveda, your Prakriti determines your susceptibility to disease and your response to treatment. It's based on the balance of the doshas vata, pitta, kapha. For a long time, this was dismissed as, philosophy or just a metaphor.
It sounds a bit like a horoscope for your body.
It can sound that way, but modern genomics is finding that people who are classified with different Prakriti actually have distinct genetic and metabolic profiles.
So you're saying my dosha might actually be a shorthand for my genetic phenotype, for how my genes are actually expressed.
It's looking that way. It's a pattern recognition system for genetics developed thousands of years before we knew what a gene was. It's just astonishing.
And what about the srotas? Those were the channels, right?
Yes, the srotas. They're described as channels, both physical and subtle pathways for nutrients and waste. Modern research is now mapping these to specific physiological systems, like the lymphatic drainage system, microcirculation pathways, even the transport of neurotransmitters.
So it's not a mystical tube, it's a functional pathway.
It's a functional pathway. And it's the exact same story with TCM, isn't it? The meridians.
Meridians, yeah. The concept of chi, or energy, flowing through these meridians was the biggest stumbling block for Western scientists.
Of course. Because you cut the body open and you don't see a meridian. There's no anatomical tube there. So the assumption was it must not be real.
But now, with things like biomechanical mapping and neuroimaging, we're seeing something there. We're seeing a pattern.
We are seeing that these meridian lines often correspond directly to connective tissue planes, the fascia, and these dense neurovascular bundles.
So the ancients were describing the function, how the energy and signal moves. Modern science was looking for a physical structure.
They were looking at the same thing, just describing it in completely different languages. One was the language of function and metaphor. The other was the language of anatomy and molecules.
And that translation process is where the real excitement is happening right now.
It absolutely is.
But there is one area where this translation is getting incredibly specific, and that is deep inside our own bodies, in the gut.
Oh, this is the area where the research is just exploding. It changes everything.
The microbiome factory, this completely changed how I look at the supplements in my kitchen cabinet. We have to talk about ginseng,
The king of herbs.
the king of herbs. But there was a massive problem with it, a paradox that stumped pharmacologists for years.
The absorption problem. It just didn't make any sense on a chemical level.
Walk us through that, because if I eat a ginseng root, I assume my stomach digests it and it goes into my blood. That's how food works.
That is how nutrients usually work.
Yeah.
But the active compounds in ginseng, these things called ginsenosides, specifically molecules like RB1 and RG1, are chemically massive.
Okay.
They are big, bulky molecules loaded with sugar chains. Imagine trying to push a grand piano through a standard doorway.
It's not fitting.
It's not fitting. So logically, if the molecule is too big to cross the intestinal wall, it should just pass right through you.
It should be useless.
It should be totally useless. But we knew it wasn't useless. We had 3,000 years of clinical data and anecdotal evidence saying this heals people, this boosts energy. So science was stuck in this paradox. The drug works, but it shouldn't.
So what was the missing link? What was the piece they weren't seeing?
You weren't the one digesting it. Your bacteria
So,
were.
wait, say that again. I'm not the one processing the ginseng.
You are outsourcing the labor. You're the manager, not the worker. When those big ginsenosides hit your gut, specific bacteria, mostly strains like bifidobacterium, latch onto them, and they perform a process called deglycosylation.
Deglycosylation. That sounds like they are stripping something off the molecule.
That's exactly what it is. They're like little chemical mechanics. They take the bulky, unabsorbable parent compound like ginsenoside RB1, and they chew off the sugars to convert it into a smaller, more active metabolite. In this case, they turn it into something called compound K.
Compound K. It sounds like a secret military serum.
It might as well be. It is the heavy hitter. It's the superhero of this story. Compound K is small enough to fit through the door. Its bioavailability is enhanced 3 to 5-fold compared to the raw plant compound.
So in many ways, you aren't really taking ginseng for the RB1. You are taking ginseng so your bacteria can make compound K for you.
That is the crucial aha moment. This explains the individual variability we see in all herbal medicine.
You mean why it works for one person but not another?
Exactly. You and I could take the exact same dose of high-quality ginseng. But if I have a healthy microbiome with plenty of bifidobacterium and you have, well, bad gut bacteria, maybe you just took a course of antibiotics or you have a poor diet.
Then I can't make the compound K.
You might get a massive therapeutic benefit and you might get nothing at all. You can't build the factory to make the good stuff.
This blows my mind. This is the definition of a symbiotic relationship. We are outsourcing our pharmaceutical processing to our bacteria.
We are. And this isn't just a theory anymore. The research shows that this biotransformation is absolutely essential for the therapeutic targets of ginseng. Let's look at diabetes, specifically type 2 diabetes.
Right. The research mentioned a specific pathway here, the AMPK pathway.
Yes. So ginsenoside RB1 and its metabolite, our friend compound K, they activate the AMPK signaling pathway. AMPK is often called the metabolic master switch in our cells.
The master switch, what does it switch on?
When you activate it, it improves insulin sensitivity and reduces fasting blood glucose. It basically tells your cells to be more efficient with sugar.
And the numbers in the studies were impressive, right? This wasn't a small effect.
Not at all. The clinical evidence cited shows about a 15.2% reduction in fasting blood glucose. That is significant. That's not just a rounding error. That is comparable to some pharmaceutical interventions.
And it goes way beyond diabetes. There's the microbiota gut-brain axis. We used to think the gut and the brain were separate, but we now know they were constantly talking.
Constantly. It's a superhighway of information, mainly through the vagus nerve and a storm of biochemical signals.
And ginseng is hacking into this line of communication.
It is. The ginsenosides modulate the vagus nerve and these G protein-coupled receptors, and the study showed tangible improvements in cognitive decline.
How do they measure that?
They used the mini mental state examination scores. It's a standard test for dementia and cognitive function, and the scores increased by 2.4 points with ginseng treatment.
Which, for families dealing with cognitive decline, any improvement any point gained is meaningful.
It's a huge deal. And then there was the cancer research. Now, this seemed a bit more experimental, but it was fascinating. The connection to immunotherapy.
Yes, this is very cutting edge. We're looking at the tumor microenvironment. The research suggests that ginseng polysaccharides might boost the efficacy of PD-1 inhibitors. PD-1 inhibitors are those new cancer drugs that basically take the brakes off the immune system so it can attack the tumor, right?
Correct. But they don't work for everyone. The tumor can be very good at hiding. The study suggests that ginseng can alter tryptophan metabolism, specifically reducing the kynurenine-tryptophan ratio.
And what does that do?
By doing that, and by modulating the gut bacteria, it seems to make the tumor more visible to the immune system. It uncloaks it.
So it's acting like a wingman for the immunotherapy drug.
That's a perfect analogy. It's remodeling the environment so the primary drug can do its job better. Again, it's holistic. It's not attacking the cancer cell directly. It's changing the ecosystem, the gut, and the tumor microenvironment to favor the host.
Speaking of changing the environment, there was a really interesting note about aging, the difference between red ginseng and white ginseng. I always thought red ginseng was just older, or maybe a different species.
It's a common misconception. It's actually the same plant, just processed differently. Red ginseng is steamed.
Steamed.
Yes, and that steaming process, an ancient technique, changes the chemical profile. The research suggests that red ginseng might be better for enriching a specific, very important bacteria called Akkermansia.
Akkermansia. I've heard of this one. Isn't that the slimming bacteria?
That's the nickname it's picked up. It's strongly associated with a lean metabolism and a strong, healthy gut lining. So the simple ancient act of steaming the herb actually dictates which specific bacteria it feeds, which in turn dictates the health outcome.
It's just layers upon layers of complexity, from the plant to the processing to the bacteria to the final effect.
It's a cascade.
But sometimes the validation of ancient medicine is incredibly direct. It's not about complex microbiomes. It's about simply reading the manual correctly. And we have to talk about the artisan story.
This is arguably the greatest success story of integrating ancient wisdom with modern science. It's just an incredible tale. It led to a Nobel Prize in 2015 for Tu Youyou.
And to understand the weight of this, we need to understand the stakes. The context here is crucial.
It is. This wasn't research for the sake of research. Malaria was ravaging populations. The parasites had developed resistance to all the standard drugs, like chloroquine. People were dying.
And this was during the Vietnam War era, right?
Exactly. Soldiers were dying from malaria in huge numbers. The North Vietnamese government asked China for help. It was a national crisis. So the Chinese government launched a secret military project called Project 523.
It sounds like a spy movie, Project 523.
It really does. And Tu Youyou was appointed to lead the research. And she didn't just look at modern chemicals. She went to the library. She went back to the old texts.
And she screened thousands of them.
She screened 2,000 herbal recipes from traditional texts. She eventually narrowed it down to one herb, Canhao, or as we know it, sweet wormwood, Artemisia annua.
But there was a catch. They tested it in the lab, and it didn't work. The results were inconsistent.
Right, and most researchers would have given up right there. They would have said, well, the folklore was wrong. Let's try the next herb on the list.
But she didn't.
She didn't. She went back to the source. She reread a text by Gan Hong, who was a physician and an alchemist from the 4th century. We're talking 340 A.D.
A 1,600-year-old manual, and what did it say?
The text was very specific to describe a recipe. And it said to soak the herb in cold water and then wring it out to get the juice. It did not say to boil it like a tea.
And that was the eureka moment.
That was everything. Modern chemists, by default, assume you boil herbs to extract the active compounds. That's standard procedure. But heat destroys artemisinin.
So by boiling it, they were killing the medicine.
They were killing it. By following the ancient instruction to use cold extraction, she preserved the active molecule.
And that molecule, artemisinin, is now the standard of care for anti-malarial drugs worldwide. It has saved millions of lives.
Millions. This is the gold standard of what we call reverse pharmacology.
Okay, what is that?
Usually, pharmacology starts in the lab with a molecule and moves to the clinic to see if it works on people. Reverse pharmacology starts with clinical experience, in this case, recorded in ancient texts, and works backward to find the molecule responsible.
It proves that the method of preparation in these ancient traditions isn't just ritual.
It's chemistry.
It's chemistry that they figured out through centuries of trial and error. If you boiled it, the patient died. If you soaked it cold, the patient lived. You write that down.
Precisely. It's empirical science, just over a much, much longer timeline.
Let's pivot to Ayurveda. We talked about the systems, but I want to look at some of the specific herbs mentioned in the Ayurveda under the microscope section. Let's start with Bacopa monnieri, or Brahmi.
Yes, this is a staple in Ayurveda for anything related to the brain. Traditionally, it was used for memory improvement, insomnia, anxiety, a real cognitive tonic.
And has modern science figured out what's in it?
They have. They've isolated the active compounds. They're called triterpenoid saponins.
And does it hold up in clinical trials? Does it actually improve memory?
It does. The source material references clinical studies showing measurable improvements in verbal learning and delayed word recall. So it helps people learn new words and then remember them later.
But there is a funny note about the side effects in the research. It causes gut issues?
It can. Increase stool frequency and nausea in some people,
Hmm.
which ironically is considered a validation of its potency.
How so?
It shows the herb is physiologically active, it's having a real effect. It acts on the gut, which again links back to that gut-brain axis we keep talking about. It's not a placebo if it's upsetting your stomach while improving your memory.
That's a fair point. A placebo usually doesn't send you to the bathroom. What about turmeric? Everyone and their mother is taking turmeric lattes and supplements these days.
Turmeric, or more specifically its main active compound, curcumin, is probably the most studied anti-inflammatory in the entire herbal world. The evidence is overwhelming. Systematic reviews confirm a clear dose-response benefit for inflammation. It works,
But
but it suffers from the same problem as ginseng. Exactly. It's very hard for the body to absorb. If you just eat raw turmeric powder, most of it passes right through you. It's a waste.
in traditional Indian cooking, how is turmeric always used?
In curries, so it's cooked with fats, like ghee or coconut milk, and always with other spices,
Specifically black pepper.
specifically black pepper. And science now knows that piperine, the active compound in black pepper and lipids, or fats, increase the absorption of curcumin by massive amounts. Some studies say up to 2,000%.
2,000%. So again, the tradition had the delivery mechanism built right into the recipe.
The recipe was actually a sophisticated pharmaceutical delivery system. They knew what they were doing.
That is fascinating. And that leads us to this concept of Rajayana. It translates to rejuvenation, right?
Yes, the path of essence is a more literal translation. But in modern terms, we map this to the concept of adaptogens. These are substances that help the body resist stressors, whether those stressors are physical, chemical, or biological. The sources mention Withania somnifera, which is ashwagandha for fatigue, and Boswellia serrata for pain.
So they aren't fixing a specific broken part.
No, they're raising the body's overall threshold for stress. They're making you more resilient. It's a very holistic goal.
Now, we have to talk about the one therapy that I think faces the most skepticism in the West, even though it's become so common, acupuncture.
Acupuncture is fascinating because the narrative around it is shifting so rapidly. For decades, it was dismissed because of the energy explanation, chi meridians.
Right. Western doctors couldn't find the chi, so they assumed the whole practice was fake.
But now we are moving away from that and into a neurobiological explanation.
We're looking at the wiring.
Exactly, we're looking at the wiring. The research now shows that stimulating these specific acupoints triggers the release of neurotransmitters, like endorphins, the body's own natural painkillers.
And structurally, as we mentioned earlier, the points often sit right on top of nerve bundles and these connective tissue planes.
That's right. So when you put the needle in, you aren't unblocking some mystical river. You are literally hacking the nervous system. You are sending a direct signal to the spinal cord and the brain.
And the institutions adopting this aren't fringe wellness clinics anymore. We are talking about the Mayo Clinic.
Yes, the Mayo Clinic uses acupuncture routinely for chronic pain, for nausea from chemotherapy, and for fatigue. But the biggest endorsement really comes from the VHA, the Veterans Health Administration.
This part of the research was really moving. The VHA is America's largest integrated healthcare system, and it is dealing with the opioid crisis firsthand.
Absolutely. They have veterans coming back from combat with severe chronic pain, and for years the only answer was, here are some pills, more and more pills.
And that led to addiction and so much tragedy.
It did. So the VHA, under the guidance of people like Dr. Henry Roca, shifted to a whole health approach. They needed non-pharmacologic options. They were desperate for something that worked without destroying lives.
And acupuncture fit the bill.
Acupuncture, alongside things like yoga and nutrition. The evidence cited shows it helps veterans taper off their opioids. But it does something else too, something more profound. It reframes the pain.
What does that mean, reframing the pain?
Well, When you take a pill, you are trying to silence the body. You're saying, shut up, pain. It's a passive experience. You swallow the pill and you wait for it to work on you.
Okay.
When you do acupuncture or yoga, you are engaging with your body. You are treating the pain as a neuroscience signal that can be modulated rather than just damage that needs to be numbed. It changes the patient's relationship with their own suffering.
It empowers them. It moves them from being a passive victim of their pain to an active participant in their healing.
That is a powerful distinction. Passive treatment versus active engagement.
But we promised the listeners we wouldn't just do the highlight reel. We have to look at the dark side. Because when you start mixing ancient traditions with modern industrial mass production, things can get very, very dangerous.
We have to talk about heavy metals. And I want to be very clear here. We aren't talking about trace amounts you might find in food. We're talking about toxicity levels that put people in the hospital.
The FDA warnings cited in our stack were not subtle at all. Lead, mercury, arsenic, even strychnine.
It's the ultimate tragic irony. You turn to ancient medicine because you want to get away from toxic chemicals and pharmaceuticals. You want something natural, something gentle.
So you buy a bottle of Rumacare or some Ayurvedic tonic online?
Exactly. And weeks later, you start feeling off, worse.
And symptoms are so insidious, right? It's not like you drop dead instantly.
No, it's a slow poisoning. Fatigue, stomach cramps, maybe your hands start tingling, brain fog, confusion.
Which, tragically, sounds exactly like the symptoms you were probably trying to cure in the first place.
Precisely. So you might take more of the herb, thinking you just need a higher dose to feel better. And that spiral can be devastating.
So we need to distinguish why this is happening. Because there seem to be two different problems here. One is accidental, and one is intentional.
Yes. One is negligence, and one is a misunderstood tradition.
Let's start with the negligence, the accidental contamination.
That's the modern world intruding. It's pollution. If you grow herbs in soil that is drenched in industrial runoff or pesticides, the plant doesn't know the difference. It sucks it all up.
So the plant just acts like a sponge for whatever's in the ground.
Right. So that's accidental contamination.
Mm-hmm.
But the second source is intentional. And this is much harder to wrap your head around. It's a concept in Ayurveda called Rasa Shastra.
This blew my mind. The idea that they put lead and mercury in there on purpose?
In the ancient texts, certain metals like mercury and lead were considered potent medicines if, and this is the crucial part, if they were processed correctly. We're talking about these incredibly elaborate purification processes, heating, cooling, treating with herbal juices, sometimes for weeks or months. The goal was to change the chemical structure of the metal to make it safe and therapeutic.
It's alchemy.
It is literally alchemy. And maybe 2,000 years ago, a master alchemist monitored every single step. But today, you have a factory in a non-regulated country mass-producing millions of pills. That purification process is expensive. It takes time.
So corners get cut.
Corners get cut. And when you cut corners on purifying mercury,
You end up selling poison. That is absolutely terrifying. It's like a cargo cult version of medicine. They're copying the list of ingredients but skipping all the safety protocols.
that's a perfect description for it. And then you have the other danger, herb-drug interactions. We mentioned the 18 incompatible medicaments in TCM.
Right, the forbidden combinations from the ancient texts.
One specific example from the research is Panax ginseng and Veratrum nigrum. If you take them together, they disrupt each other's metabolism and can be toxic. But the bigger risk for our listeners today is the interaction with modern pharmaceutical drugs.
The stat here was shocking to me. Over 40% of patients do not tell their doctors they are taking herbal supplements.
40%. They think it's natural, so it's safe. So it doesn't count as medicine.
But it does.
It absolutely does. If you are on blood thinners like warfarin, or you're preparing for surgery, or you're on diabetes medication, and you take a powerful herb like ginseng or ginkgo or St. John's wort, you can have a catastrophic interaction. You can bleed out on the operating table, or your blood sugar can crash dangerously low.
So the takeaway there is crystal clear. Tell your doctor everything, even the tea, especially the pee.
Absolutely. Transparency is safety. There's no way around it.
So we have the incredible promise, and we have the very real peril. Where do we go from here? What does the future of this collision look like?
The future has to be integration and standardization. And the World Health Organization just made a massive move in this direction, a really foundational one.
The ICD-11 update.
Yes, the International Classification of Diseases. This is the code book that doctors, hospitals, and insurance companies use worldwide for everything.
Everything.
The WHO officially included a module for traditional medicine. It's called Module 2, covering Ayurveda, Siddha, and Unani.
Why is a codebook so important? It sounds like bureaucracy.
It sounds like it, but it's a game changer. Because if you can't code it, you can't count it. And if you can't count it, you can't study it properly. This creates standardized terminology. It allows for better data collection globally. We can finally track safety and efficacy on a massive scale.
And it also opens the door for insurance coverage.
That's huge. It moves these therapies from the fringe to the ledger and makes them official.
And we are seeing this integration happening in major hospitals. We mentioned the Mayo Clinic, but the Cleveland Clinic also has holistic pain management programs.
They do. They're combining surgery and drugs with acupuncture, chiropractic, and yoga. It's not one or the other. It's the best of both.
And I really liked the tool the VHA is using that was mentioned, the Hope Note.
The Hope Note is beautiful. It's such a simple but profound shift. Instead of just asking, where does it hurt? The doctor asks, what matters to you in your life? What do you want to be able to do that you can't do now?
So it identifies the patient's values and life goals.
Exactly. It puts the human back in the center of the equation. If my goal is to be able to play on the floor with my grandkids or walk my daughter down the aisle, the treatment plan should be designed to support that specific goal, whether it's surgery or meditation or both.
It shifts the focus from treating the disease to healing the person.
That's the core of it.
So what is on the scientific to-do list? What do we need to do to make this unified medicine a reality?
Well, first, we need more rigorous randomized controlled trials, RCTs, with large sample sizes. We need to move beyond small anecdotal studies to really prove what works and for whom. Second, we need standardization of active ingredients. When I buy a bottle of ginseng, I need to know exactly how much RB1 and compound K is in it, so every pill is the same. Quality control has to be non-negotiable.
And pharmacovigilance, that's a big one.
A huge one.
Yeah.
Tracking the bad stuff. We need a global system to catch those heavy metals and adverse reactions before they become a widespread crisis.
It really feels like we are at a turning point. We are witnessing the transition of ancient medicine from something seen as folklore to evidence-based practice.
It's not about choosing one over the other. It's not East versus West. It's about using the power of the microscope to find the gold in the mountains of tradition.
While also identifying and discarding the dangerous elements, like the heavy metals.
It's about humility on both sides. Science realizing it doesn't know everything about the complex system of a living being, and tradition realizing it needs the rigorous checks and balances of the modern lab to ensure safety and efficacy.
Well said. A true integration. Before we wrap up, thank you to all our partners, sponsors, and scholars who made this podcast and the research possible. We're truly grateful for your support. And to our listeners, thank you for being part of this journey with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and follow Stack Studios for more informative content. And support us on Patreon. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and let the search for wisdom guide you forward. Have a great day.